So I've got Mr. Danny here. We're working on his come when call. We're working on his jumping, and we're working on just duration behaviors to reinforce calm behavior in general, so that's what he preferences. We started off with a game called the name game that kind of sets us up for our come when called. So it's basically putting a whole bunch of value when you just say his name, because that's going to be the front end of our come when called. So we want him to really, really value it when we say his name. So we'll give it a shot here. Danny boy. Yes, good boy. Good boy. You can initiate that anytime he's a little bit of distance away from you. Sometimes that just isn't so with the dog, so sometimes we've got to toss treats away and call him back. So he's away from me, so I'm going to do it again. Danny boy. Yes, good boy. Good boy. Very good. So we're exploring, so we're staying busy. Danny boy. Good boy. Good job. So this is kind of where we're going to start off to build that value. I want to give you a couple of tips though, just in case he doesn't come right away. So we tend to, you see how he just walked up and I gave him a treat? That's one way to help just really putting value on checking in with you frequently. That's one thing that you can do. But let's say we've called him and he hasn't come. So the first thing we want to keep in mind is we want to, in this name game, we're going to set ourselves up for success to combat when the environment is more valuable than us. So if we practice at a whole bunch low level where the environment is not that exciting, we're going to have a head start on that. Another thing we want to remember is in training, we want to try not to repeat ourselves constantly because human nature tells us to do so. So a lot of times we kind of get in our own way there. But when we repeat ourselves a whole bunch in training, we're actually really just teaching our dogs to ignore us. Another thing that happens sometimes is, hey, why are we making a mess back here, huh? Why are we making a mess? Another thing that happens is dogs are fantastic at picking up patterns and making weird associations that we don't even really want them to make. So sometimes when we repeat ourselves a whole bunch, what also happens is the dog is used to hearing it several times before anything happens, and so intro mega frustration because they're like, you've only said it once, I've got time, or I don't really care. So we want to avoid all those things, and come when called is such an important behavior that we really, really, really don't want to just keep repeating ourselves. So 2 things you can do just as a practice leading up to come when called practice, just to build value. Play that name game, and also anytime he checks in with you, really reinforce that a whole bunch because that's going to give us a head start. But I want to give you a couple of tips to help when he doesn't come right away. So let's say I'm going to toss a piece of treat away, get him real busy. Let's say I've called him once and he hasn't come to me. I'm just going to keep throwing treats so that he stays where he is. He's good boy. I'm going to go ahead and reinforce that because he came to check in with me. I want that to be pretty valuable. So if I've called a dog and they don't come right away or they don't seem very interested, then what happens next is I'm going to make some kind of secondary noise. Whether that be anything. It can even be a squeak. It can even be me shaking a treat bag. Anything that is not me saying words. That's the only important thing to try to get the dog's attention. Be careful though, because if it's the same thing every time, like, Danny come every single time. He may think that that secondary sound is part of the cue, and he won't come until he hears the whole thing. So be very, very careful, mix it up, keep him guessing. Body language is gonna help us the most in communicating with our dogs in general, because that is the language that they speak. So let's say I've caught him and he didn't come. And of course he's gonna walk right up. I'm gonna go ahead and give him a treat because I wanna put the value there, right? Let's say I've caught him and he didn't come. Then the next thing I'm gonna do is try to throw off body language signals. Danny, I'm gonna bend down, I'm gonna look very inviting. Yeah, that's a good boy. That's a good boy, yeah. Put all the valuable things right there. Sometimes too, just a little bit of just a little bend down towards, just like this, even if you're sitting and you just kind of come forward a little bit, your body is very, very inviting. Let's say that none of these things work. If you're indoors, everything we've just talked about, chances are something's gonna work. But I wanna give you a tip to have in your back pocket for emergencies only, where, well, I don't mean emergency, but like everything else has failed before you've tried this. Let's say I've done all of those things, right? Not coming to me for whatever reason. It is okay if I go to him just a little bit, offer out what I've got, and lure him back to where I was when I called him. That's important. Then give him the treat. You don't want to do this step often because you don't want him to kind of think, okay, well, you'll come get me. You want to use this absolutely if nothing else works. Body language, fun sounds, those are what you're hoping for. With your name game, you're really hoping that just the sound of you calling his name is enough. Sometimes it's not. Environment is more. But we want to set you up with everything you've got to make it successful, because come when called is a very tricky thing. Another thing I want you guys to remember, tone of voice is everything with come when called, because if I don't sound real happy, you know, dogs don't ever feel guilty, and they don't ever really know what they've done despite looking pretty guilty. But I can guarantee you, because they do not speak English, obviously, if he was a human and he didn't speak the same language as me, but he could definitely tell I was upset. Like my tone of voice, my body language, my facial expressions, he could definitely know that I was upset. That's more like what happens in those situations with our dogs. So if I don't sound real pleasant, I always tell my clients it's kind of like having that person who, when they call you on the phone, you kind of screen your call and you look like, do I want to do this right now? Or, oh, what do you want this time? Don't ever let your dog get to that point where they want to screen your calls when you call him and he pauses to read you before he decides whether or not he's going to come, because that's going to poison our come when call. So no matter how we feel in that moment, we've got to at least sound pleasant. You don't have to, oh, Danny, boy, baby, baby. You don't have to go all to that extreme. Just sound pleasant, because if you don't sound at least pleasant enough, if your body language does not look inviting, that's how your come when called gets poisoned. So it's been a long come when called chat, so we're actually going to move on to jumping up, which we will give you a video for also. And we'll keep working, and we'll see you soon.